All right, it's time to update the power rankings. And let me tell you something, they are absolutely jam-packed.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans. Welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Hey, there's my lower third. You can call me Sully. I've been a baseball podcaster for well over a decade now, and this is my sixth full season here at the Locked On Podcast Network, where this year I'm hosting not only Locked On MLB, but Locked On A's. So if you listen to us, you get 10 episodes a week with your pal Sully. I'm at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter, or whatever it's called now, and on Instagram. I'm your pal Sully, but Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. And if you're listening to our show every day, whether it's this show or Locked On A's, and you want to post on any of those social media things to make all of our lives better, make sure to use that hashtag EverydaySully. It lets us know who's listening to us every day. Believe it or not, it kind of helps. Now, today's episode of Locked On MLB, I had to think a second which episode. Am I doing Locked On MLB or Locked On A's right now? I sometimes get confused. It's brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB. Use code lowercase LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Hey, before we get going to talk about the power rankings, let's go through the trivia question. And the trivia question was, who was the only pitcher to strike out Tony Gwynn 3 times in one game? And I got the question. Got to give the source here. The Baseball Addicts Trivia book by Chip Trillix. Trillix or Trellix? I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Well, listener, Keep Playing One says the only pitcher to strike out Tony Gwynn 3 times in a game is Bob Welch. Bob Welch had a great career. You know, the late Bob Welch won the Cy Young Award with the A's. I actually don't think he should have won the Cy Young Award. I don't think he was even the number one pitcher on his own team. But he had a wonderful career. He had some great years with Los Angeles. And he closed out the 1981 NLCS, breaking the hearts of Montreal Expos fans, and has won a pair of World Series titles for his trouble. A little piece of trivia I learned from an A's writer was that before, the big earthquake hit the 1989 World Series, I was in Palo Alto at the time. The A's and the Giants were about to play Game 3. The Giants scored only 1 run the first 2 games. It got absolutely clobbered by Oakland in Oakland. And now the series was going to Candlestick. And the Giants, I believe, we're going to be starting Don Robinson. Scotty Greltz, I know him well enough to call him Scotty. Scotty Greltz started Game 1. Rick Russell started Game 2, so it makes sense that Don Robinson would start Game 3. Now, the A's had Dave Stewart pitching Game 1 and Mike Moore pitching Game 2. And Bob Welch was scheduled to pitch Game 3. And evidently, he was probably going to be scratched because of an injury. And pitcher Curt Young was warming up in the bullpen. And the Giants had a potent offense that was completely shut down the first 2 games. But if they were facing Curt Young while starting Don Robinson, the Giants would have had the advantage in Game 3. Game 4 was probably going to be Storm Davis versus maybe Scott Garrelts. Maybe it probably would have been Scott Garrelts, which probably would have given the Giants the advantage there. There would have been a real chance that series could have been tied 2-2. But then the earthquake hit. There was a 10-game delay. Dave Stewart and Mike Moore pitched Games 3 and 4. And it was the least competitive World Series I've ever seen in my life. And by the end, no one really cared. I mean, A's fans were obviously happy their team won the World Series, but there was a sense of deflation about the celebration. But anyway, I just was thinking about it. Bob Welch did not pitch in that World Series, and he was probably hurt, but we'll never know. All right, let's talk about the power rankings. There are games going on right now, and there's an overarching point I'm going to make a little later in the show, but we're going to go from 30 to 1 and point a few things out in the process. Now, as I'm recording this, there are games still going on. The Yankees and Cleveland are still tied in the 11th inning. The Red Sox have a lead on the Astros 6-5. And the A's and Rays are there's no score there. And the Mariners have an early lead on the Dodgers. Meanwhile, the Braves wound up beating the Phillies. The Mets wound up losing to Baltimore. And Milwaukee is just continuing to cruise to a division title. All right, let's start from the bottom, though. No surprise. The Chicago White Sox remain at number 30. The first to 80 losses, they have 95 losses. And it's funny, this week I felt like they had a decent week because they won a few games. They went 3-7. That is a good week for the White Sox because remember, the White Sox won 3 games in July. That's not a typo. The White Sox, Grady Sizemore is just basically tending the store and, watching the ship burn. And maybe they'll squeeze a win in every once in a while. And number 29, the Colorado Rockies. They've also had a losing last 10 games. And number 28, the Miami Marlins. Those are kind of your 3 write-em in stone worst teams in baseball. The White Sox are the rock bottom, and the Rocks and the Fish kind of flip-flop every other week. Now, the A's are still at number 27. Remember, these are not voted by me. These are voted by the hosts of the Locked On Podcast Network and myself. I have a vote. This is like the delegates being called in the convention today. Now, the A's are at number 27, and the Angels are at number 26. I got to have a talk to my fellow Locked On voters because that's insane. The A's are demonstrably better than the Angels. The A's have won going into the game tonight. They were 6 of their last 4 games. The Angels dropped 7 of their last 10 games. And the A's have now leapfrogged the Angels. The Angels are currently in the A's rearview mirror, and they're setting their sights on the World Series champion Texas Rangers. That's right. There's a chance the A's could finish in 3rd. Number 25, the Washington Nationals. For a couple of days, they were a playoff team in June, but things have really, really fallen apart. I do think there's talent on that team, but it's not ready yet. The Pirates are at number 24. They've dropped 8 of their last 10 games, and they are an absolute mess. This team, which was contending in June, has a ton of talent. They have to start making changes. They have to. They can't have this many losing seasons in a row and no sign of improvement despite having a lot of talent on the team. Oh, did I mention talented teams that didn't make a change in their managerial position? At 23, that gives you the Toronto Blue Jays, which is an absolute disgrace that they haven't made any major changes with that team. I'm not saying it's, and I've been saying this literally for years. I said it after the 2022 playoffs. I said it after the 2023 playoffs. I said it all this year. I'm not saying Schneider is the main problem, but when you have lots of talent on the team and it's massively underperforming, you have to at least do something to stir the proverbial pot. And now they're probably going to waste this wonderful talent that they've had. And I'm not saying this was the 1989 A's here, but holy cow, they're at least a winning team. No, they're not. They're 58-66. At number 22, you have the defending World Series champion Texas Rangers, who are falling like a rock, and they are really going to regret not selling at the trade deadline. I know. You're supposed to say, "Oh, we're going for it." They could have gotten younger. They could have shed some bad contracts. Instead, they're going to be working hard to try to keep the A's away. And before you think that's absurd, going into the game on Tuesday, the A's were only 3 games back in the loss column of the Rangers, and they have a ton of head-to-head games. Yeah, I said it. The A's could overtake the Rangers. At number 21, a team got absolutely trounced today by the aforementioned Toronto Blue Jays, the Cincinnati Reds. Again, a sub-500 team with a lot of talent on it. there are a bunch of teams that have to start making some moves because there is no dominant team. Well, there turns out there is in the National League Central, but it's not because they're so great. It's because the rest of the division stinks. I picked the Detroit Tigers at the beginning of the year because someone has to win the Central, and I thought, hey, they've got a good manager, they got some decent pitching, and they have stretches of times where they look really, really good, and they had a big win at the Little League game. They've won 6 of their last 10 games, but they're still a sub-500 team in late August, and that's not good. All right, when we come back, we're going to talk about numbers 19 through 10 and seeing just how cramped the middle part of baseball is. Passion, drive, and patience is the formula for winning championships. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need and all the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Thanks so much for making Locked On MLB your first listen. For your second listen, enjoy me, your pal Sully, as I wrap up the season on Locked On A's. Now, you may say, hey, I'm not an A's fan. Why would I listen to that? We're having a lot of fun talking about the team in their final year in Oakland. We talk about the move to Las Vegas. I went on location to Sacramento and traveled all around the Bay Area and an on-location podcast trying to find the places where they proposed to build ballparks. We're having a fun time in the last year of Oakland. So check us out on Locked On A's, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Hey, I changed my shirt. At number 19, the Cardinals have dropped 7 of their last 10 games, and any chance that they had to put together a real contender is really gone by the wayside. And that lead right now, Milwaukee has an 11-game lead over St. Louis, and St. Louis is in second place. This was a team in 2022, after they got rid of Schilt, they handed the car keys over to Marmol, and Mozeliak was in charge. They made the playoffs, but they somehow lost to Philadelphia in the wild card series. They were horrible last year, and they have a losing team this year. This is the freaking St. Louis Cardinals, and this is the 11th anniversary of their last pennant. And how many times do they have to get absolutely sandbagged in the postseason and then now be a losing team and a losing expensive team? A lot of heads have to roll. Heads have to roll in Pittsburgh. Heads have to roll in Toronto. Heads have to roll in Cincinnati. Heads have to roll in Detroit and in St. Louis. Now, heads rolled in Chicago, and the Cubs have had a decent few weeks, but again, they're still a sub-500 team in late August, and they have a double-digit deficit, say that 10 times fast, for the division, and as of this recording, they are 6 games out of the final wild card spot. So it's a lost year for the Cubs. It's been a lost year for the Rays, who do have a winning record. They're just a weird team. They're just a very weird team because it's tough to make heads or tails out of them. And because of a crowded American League, sure, they have an outside chance of still making the postseason. Going into today, they had a 7.5 behind Minnesota and Kansas City for the final wildcard spot. Everything has to go right. The Giants are at number 16. Again, right around 500. There's talent on the team. They can pitch, they can hit. And if they actually made the playoffs, they'd be really dangerous because they have the good Blake Snell and because they have a good starting rotation. And maybe they'd be able to cut some people off. They're about 4 games out of a playoff spot right now, along with the Mets at number 15. These are teams that probably won't make the postseason, but would be those prime candidates for the who would have thought the last wild card team would have Heads has to roll in Seattle as well. They're playing well against Los Angeles tonight, but they went from 10 games up, and 2 months later, they are 5 out. That's a 15-game swing in 2 months. And it isn't as if Houston is one of the best teams in the American League. I mean, they're a winning record. They're probably going to win the division. They're putting together a huge lead right now. But, they're only a couple of games ahead of Boston in terms of the win-loss record. It's just that Seattle has absolutely collapsed and has given the division to a team that looked like it was getting ready to sell. The Red Sox are what they are. They are at number 13. The Red Sox are not a great team. They're a good team. The Red Sox are not a playoff team. They're an improved team. They've filled in some of their holes, and if you're a Red Sox fan, you better hope they go on a spending spree finally. They're a fun team. They're an entertaining team. They're just not going to go far. If only they had Chris Sale. I can't complain about that because I thought Chris Sale was done, and so did you. But right now, he is the Cy Young contender for the Atlanta Braves, who have been up and down this year, but are finding themselves in position to be one of the wild card teams so far this year. And with a key win against Philadelphia, they show they can win against some good clubs. And Chris Sale has a legit shot to win the Cy Young Award that he never won in Chicago and he never won in Boston. Let's hope Vaughn Grisham gets it together. Kansas City made the biggest acquisition last year. As we all knew, Seth Lugo was going to be a Cy Young contender, right? Yikes, he and Tarek Skubal are probably the two best candidates right now. The Royals have played winning baseball and are slowly creeping up and are giving Cleveland a hard time. As of the game, going into last night's game, they were only 3 back in the loss column. Could Kansas City go from 100 losses to a division championship in 1 year? And should that make Angel fans smash their head against the wall when they keep hearing, well, it takes a long time to develop a team? Meanwhile, the Houston Astros have been in an absolute tear. Yordan Alvarez loves to hit against the Red Sox, and going into the game the other day, they've won 9 of their last 10 games. And with that, they've gone from absolutely floundering around, wondering should they sell a couple of months ago, to looking like they have the AL West pretty much in hand. And with that, would you bet against them in the playoff series? We'll see. But they're at number 10. 1 through 9, we'll bring them up. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get on the daily action with your friends and become part of the Prize Picks community today. You can win up to 100 times your money in Prize Picks with as few as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. Prize Picks is available in more than 30 states across the country, including Texas, Georgia, and right here in California. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, run your game. This is a reminder that Locked On has created the first ever national 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube for sports news. Locked On Sports Today is also available on Amazon TV and the free Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. All right. Now let's talk about it. Our top 9, shall we? The top 9 would be, hold on, I just lost my place here. At number 9, we have, drum roll please, the Minnesota Twins. The Twins, who, if the Cleveland Guardians fall apart, could take a real shot at the first place, look like a solid playoff team coming in. The Diamondbacks and the Padres are once again at 7 and 8, as they are trying to make a run at the Dodgers, but either way, pushing themselves away from the Braves, Mets, and Giants and securing themselves to have probably the most exciting wild card series we ever had. Meanwhile, the Milwaukee Brewers are feasting on what looks like a rotten National League Central and are all but certain to play either the Braves, the Mets, the Giants, or whoever clings to that final spot. Now, we've seen Milwaukee wet the bed in the postseason over the last bunch of years. So, if you do have that last wildcard spot, take your best shot at them. Who knows what will happen? Cleveland, who is playing a never-ending game against the Yankees as of right now, remain the team of the American League Central, although they do have the Royals and the Twins nipping at their heels right now. But the Guardians look like as good a pick to go to the playoffs as you can have. A lot of things have gone wrong for the New York Yankees. A lot of people complain about Boone this and Cashman that. And yet, the Yankees went into the game the other day with tied for the highest win total in baseball. You know, I don't know how they're going to do tonight. Right now, it appears that they're losing in extra innings to Cleveland. But they're still going to make the postseason. And whether or not they win the division, it's just going to go back and forth between Baltimore and the Yankees, probably for the rest of the year. And number 3 are the LA Dodgers, who everyone here in Los Angeles is talking as if they're going to be a 100-loss team. They've won 7 out of their last 10 games and are tied for the highest win total in baseball. Shouldn't that amount to something? Baltimore, very strange team, because sometimes they look like they should win the World Series and win it handily, and sometimes look like they can't even get out of their own way. They've gone 5-5 in their last 10 games, and they're number 2. And number 1 are the Phillies, who have also gone 5-5 and are tied with the best win total in all of baseball, and still look like the team to beat, even though a lot of times over the last few weeks, they look very, very beatable. Here's something that's worth noting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 teams are within 3 games in the win column. 9 teams right now have 70 wins. No one has more than 73 going into it. And that it means you have about 9 teams who are roughly the same. Your top 10, almost your entire top 10 are roughly the same. Very good teams with some strong qualities, each with a chance to go on a great run, but none of them are dominant. You know, there was a period of time when my voice didn't break, but there was another period of time when people complained about big, powerful teams like the Red Sox or the Yankees or the Braves or whatever, constantly just winning every year, clobbering other teams, this, that, and the other thing. Now, of course, that was always exaggerated because, yes, you did have a three-peat by the Yankees, but you also had many, many stretches without repeat pennant winners or World Series winners, and you've had 17 different pennant winners since 2010, and none of those teams are called the New York Yankees. And yet there seemed to be a desire to have a sense of parity in baseball, to have a sense of these are, everyone has a shot. And right now, almost a third of the teams in baseball can be considered a legitimate World Series winner. And that does not include the Astros. Would anyone be surprised? Because the Astros have fewer wins. The Royals are on the cusp of it. Would anyone be surprised if the Astros won the World Series? So let's throw them into it. A third of the teams in baseball could potentially win the World Series, and nobody would be stunned. No one could possibly be stunned if the Phillies, Orioles, Dodgers, or Yankees won. The way the Guardians have been playing, nobody could be stunned that they won, or Milwaukee running away with the division, or San Diego or the Diamondbacks playing like champions over the last bunch of weeks, or Minnesota having a solid second half, or the Astros having that World Series pedigree, being one win away last year from making it 3 straight trips to the World Series and 4 in 5 years. And the way that Kansas City has played from time to time, that would be preposterous. In fact, Seattle, who probably will be struggling to have a winning record if they made the playoffs, have the best rotation in a postseason series, but they're probably going to be playing golf. So this is what we've wanted, apparently. We've wanted a bunch of teams that are pretty good, and all of them have a shot. Now, under the playoff system that I grew up with, which was 4 division winners, as of right now, you would have the Orioles and Yankees battling for a playoff spot. The Phillies and the Dodgers would be lined up. And actually, it would be kind of weird because the Brewers would be in the American League East. The American League West team would probably be Minnesota. So you'd have the Phillies, Dodgers, whoever wins Baltimore and New York, and the Minnesota Twins. They play in the ALCS and NLCS, and then the World Series. And then the post-strike, when you had the first wild card, you would have Phillies would be the NL Central team. Obviously, you have the Orioles and Yanks would be lined up. One of them would probably be the wild card team. In the Central, you'd have the AL Central, you'd have the Guardians. The NL Central, by then you'd have the Brewers. The AL West, you would have the where I can see it's confusing because the Astros were in the National League then. So the AL West might have been the Mariners. I don't know, and neither do you. It's silly to do that in a way, but we're going to see a whole bunch of teams. You're going to see about 10 teams who you can't look me in the eye and say a World Series title is absurd. And say what you want about the expanded playoffs. Say what you want about no super team. What more do you want than getting to now, late August? We're on the verge of September and the great pennant run. And to have 1/3 of the teams in baseball be able to look at their fans and say, this could be it. This could be the year. For Phillies fans, it would be the 3rd title in the history of the franchise and the coronation of Bryce Harper. For Baltimore, it would be the accumulation of years of frustration to finally winning their first World Series title with a team that didn't have Jim Palmer on the roster. For the Dodgers, it would be basically the confirmation that this is a great team and be able to shut up the people who say, oh, you only won your lone title in the COVID years. For Yankees, it would be a return to greatness. And for a bunch of the players, like Aaron Boone, their chance to have a title to join the pantheon of Yankee greats. And for Aaron Boone and for Brian Cashman, a chance to shut up their critics. And for Hal Steinbrenner, chance to have his title. For Cleveland, it would be absolutely curing the fan base with the longest World Series drought currently in baseball. For the Padres, it would be the first ever title for the San Diego Padres, and to give a fan base whose pain is incredibly underappreciated the greatest sports moment in their life. For Arizona, it would be a wonderful middle finger to the people who thought their pennant last year was a fluke, and a middle finger to the St. Louis Cardinals saying, enjoy, Paul Goldschmidt, we'll take a World Series title. For the Twins, it would be the happy ending for a horrible saga that began after the 2001 season when the Minnesota Twins were threatened to be absolutely collapsed and contracted, to then have the glory of all those division titles in the 2000s, but never winning a pennant, and finally winning the first World Series of Target Field. And for the Astros, a chance to puff up their chest and say, all right, we'll win another one. Go check us. Go check if we were cheating on this. And raise a middle finger to all those haters. That's 1/3 of the fan bases in baseball who are waking up today saying, we could do it this year. This could be it. And if you wonder if it feels good, go talk to Bryce Patrick of Locked On Rangers. Last year, the Rangers were floating around heading into September, looking like a mess, but hanging around. At one point, they fell out of a playoff spot with the Mariners in first place by themselves in September. But Texas righted the ship and gave the fans the October they'd been dreaming about their whole lives. one of those teams I mentioned, unless Kansas City or Atlanta come out and win, one of those 10, well, heck with it, let's make it 12. One of those 12 fan bases is going to have the October of their dreams in an off season where they just rewatch the highlights over and over again. We are now in late August, and you may think it's artificial. You may have preferred the old way, but in the old way, there would have been a lot of great teams saying, well, it's a good year, but we never had a shot. All right, I'm going to give you today's trivia question, and that is this. Of all the career leaders of lifetime triples, only one player in the history of baseball hit 150 career triples, all after the integration of baseball. Taking a list of the people who lead the league in triples, it's a lot of people in the 1890s to the 1910s when baseball was segregated. But only one player hit 150 triples in his career after the integration of the game. Who was that player? All right, follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter and Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast at Instagram, talking about a crammed power rankings and what that could mean to baseball. This has been Locked On MLB. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.